Chapter 13. Jordan looked for his cousin at school the next day during lunch period, but couldn't find him. Students weren't allowed to stay in his or her classrooms during lunch, which was probably just where Connor would be. Jordan looked around one more time before deciding to go searching for his cousin's art class. He saw Aaron sitting at their table and talking with a friend. Travis wasn't with her. So both boys were missing. Strange. Jordan made his way down a hallway, keeping an eye out for any hall monitors. He'd encountered a teacher once during lunch period a few months back, when he and some friends had decided to eat in class, and that had ended up blowing it for everyone when that teacher followed him from the bathroom and disbanded the get-together. Jordan remembered how hot his face had felt as he struggled to come up with a lie to tell the teacher. Those friends hadn't spoken to him since. He rounded a corner and saw Connor's class on the left. The door was closed. He was about to open it when someone burst through, nearly knocking him down. It was Travis, and he looked pissed. The boys stared at each other for a moment before Travis charged off. Jordan looked into the classroom and saw Connor sitting on one of the desks, facing the windows. "Connor?" His cousin jumped at the call of his name. His eyes were wet and red. "What are you doing here?" he asked as he wiped tears away. "I was looking for you. What just happened? Did Travis hit you or something?" Connor laughed. "No. If he had, he'd be dead right now." Jordan ignored the joking tone. "Why are you crying?" Connor walked past him to get to the door. "I'm not," he said, wiping his cheeks dry. Jordan kept a closer eye on his cousin that week. Something was definitely wrong with Connor. What that had to do with Travis was anyone's guess. Aaron was just as clueless about her boyfriend and, therefore, not much help. Jordan felt like everything was spinning out of control. He wished Mom was there to tell him everything would be okay. He wondered if she knew about Mr. Lepper's murder yet. She hadn't called to check on Jordan, and per Dad's request, Jordan hadn't called her. Dad probably figured she would worry and try to bring Jordan back to Georgia. What about Connor, though? Would she leave him with Dad? Most likely. She was a good woman, but Jordan knew she'd never felt responsible for Connor because he wasn't her son. A curious thought suddenly occurred to Jordan as he rode the bus to school the next day. What if Mom did take him back? He and Connor would be separated. The two were practically brothers, and though Connor got on his nerves often, Jordan still loved him. Dawn decided to finally stop brooding and get back to life. At some point, while doing the boys' laundry, he realized he'd been in a depressing state of mind for quite a while. For how long, he had no idea, but he did know it had started even before Samantha left him. When Connor made him laugh at the dinner table that night, however, something had opened up inside him, some hidden reservoir of happiness, and he was still feeling its lingering effects to this day. He felt like a new man. Despite the murder, he felt optimistic about the future. Anyone could have murdered Mr. Lepper. There was no evidence to point to either of his boys. He had simply jumped to conclusions. Though there was Monica to think about. She'd found out what happened and was worried sick. He headed upstairs and started picking Connor's clothes up off the floor and loading them into a handbasket when he noticed his camcorder peeking out from under the bed. Don had bought it for his birthday, though Connor rarely used it. The camera had dirt on it now. Don grabbed it, examined it. Did Connor take it with him when he went camping? Don's pulse quickened. Could there be evidence of the murder on this very camera? Don tossed it in the basket and left the room. The boys were playing laser tag and wouldn't be back for hours. He went down to the den and turned on the TV. He then hooked the camera to it and began playing the recording. There was shaky footage of Jordan and two other teens, a boy and a girl, walking through the woods. Don assumed Connor was holding the camera. The kids came across a stream. They found a weird hole in the ground next to the stream, the one in which Mr. Lepper was buried. More footage of the kids talking around a campfire at night. Then, nothing. The recording ended. Don relaxed. There had been nothing to incriminate the boys in the crime, no footage of Lepper or his murderer. Don was about to stop the recording. More footage appeared. The cameraman was pointing the camera at a man's back. The man was none other than Mr. Lepper himself. He was standing outside a big tent. He looked like he was about to open that tent when something seized the old man by the neck. It had been so fast that Don barely registered it as a hand. Now the camera was pointed downward and slightly back. Don could see Lepper's left foot dragging against the ground. Whoever grabbed him was running very quickly through the woods. Don's heart hammered in his chest as he watched his former neighbor plunge headfirst into that hole. Then the camera fell to the ground, pointing in the opposite direction. All Don could do was listen as something that sounded like a dog quickly shoveled dirt into the hole, burying Lepper alive. Jordan put on his glowing vest and prepared himself for what was to come. He looked at his fellow teammates lined up behind him. They were all pulling their own vests from the rack and clipping them on. A large round target glowed blue in the very center of the vests. Being out of the house and with friends was exactly what he needed. The kids at school seemed to forget all about the event from weeks ago. Oh, the attention span of a teenager. And Dad slowly seemed to escape his quote-unquote fog of torment, as Jordan liked to call it. Still, it was nice to unwind. Connor, Aaron, Travis, and a few others were on his team. Travis was helping Aaron with her vest, which she accepted reluctantly. They were clearly still having problems, which actually pleased Jordan, though he'd never admit that to anyone. That would make him sound like a monster. And Jordan was no monster. "You ready?" Connor asked as he aimed his laser gun at the wall in front of him. He looked ready to kill. After witnessing a brief and cheesy instructional speech from an employee in an quote-unquote airlock, the two teams, red and blue, were let into the battlefield. Jordan took in the black light brilliance of walls and forts. Arrows pointed in glowing orange, telling them which ways to go. The red team flowed into the opposite end of the field and were setting up defensive positions. Jordan barely saw them through the numerous obstructions as he followed Connor to the top of the closest fort. "Come on," said Connor as they charged up the ramp. "We can ambush them. They'll try to sneak up on us." Once they got to the top, they hid behind a wall. Connor peeked around the corner and said, "Here they come." Jordan heard footfalls on the floor, felt the vibrations from the ramp. There were only two ways into this fort. Suddenly, Connor jumped from his hiding spot and started pulling the trigger. Jordan followed. 2 boys stood there. Connor had shot one, causing the opponent's red vest to vibrate and flicker. Jordan shot the other, putting him into a 10-second delay as well. "Fuck you both," said Connor's victim. "All's fair in love and war," Connor replied with a grin as he started to run away. "You would say that, fag." Connor stopped in his tracks, halfway down the ramp. "You left your boyfriend behind," the sore loser continued. "He's my cousin," Jordan said unhelpfully. He and Connor looked nothing alike, so he understood the confusion, though he didn't like the name-calling. "Whatever, queer." The 2 red members ran off just as their vests reactivated. Jordan turned back to his cousin. Connor was no longer there. Jack and Leo ran down the ramp of the opposing team's fort and began blasting every blue they could find. Jack was still fuming from the encounter he'd had with those 2 blues who ambushed them. The black one had claimed they were cousins. How was that possible? Jack's 16-year-old brain couldn't process the concept of interracial families. Either way, it didn't matter. Jack had a plan for those 2. If he could get the timid Leo to go with it, that was. Jack and Leo looked alike, both with bowl-cut brown hair and freckles on their noses, but they couldn't be any more different if they'd been paid to be. Jack was the adventurous type, Leo the rule follower. Jack didn't quite understand why the 2 got along so well, though Mama always said that opposites attract. To be honest, Jack liked being idolized, and he got the impression that Leo adored him. Leo hadn't always had that distinctive haircut that was so similar to Jack's. He'd even taken to liking the same music and movies as Jack. Some kids at school thought it was creepy, but Jack didn't mind. He and Leo were in their own little world, where other people's opinions couldn't touch them. He and Leo had blasted a few more blues as they made their way to the ramp of their own fort. The quote-unquote cousins would probably head in this direction. "What are we doing?" Leo asked. "We're gonna get those assholes back." "Why?" Jack sighed. "Because I don't like them. All they did was tag us. That's what they're supposed to do. I don't care. I've never ever been tagged first. They cheated somehow." Deep down, Jack knew they hadn't cheated, but the mind was capable of convincing one of anything. And Jack's mind told him those boys were playing dirty, so Jack had to play dirty as well. He had something other than simple harmless revenge on the agenda. He wasn't going to tag them. He was going to hurt them. There was a particular spot in the battlefield that was completely hidden from view. Whether it was put there for tactical reasons or perhaps just a structural oversight, Jack figured it would serve his purposes. Jack and Leo stealthily worked through the maze of walls and waist-high barriers, with Jack noting the glowing orange and green markers. The spot he was searching for looked like someone had thrown a bucket of orange paint on the outer barriers, hiding the niche beyond. That niche was where he planned to take the cousins. He just hoped Leo was up to the task. Though Jack thought highly of himself, he wasn't sure he could beat up 2 guys at the same time on his own. After rounding a corner in the middle of the battlefield, Jack saw the niche. The glowing orange paint made the area beyond look even darker. The barrier was split down the middle, with just enough space to squeeze through. Jack and Leo removed their vests and hid them behind another barrier a few feet away. Then they creeped into the niche and waited. After a minute, Jack saw the black cousin walk by. He looked lost and confused. Jack was confused as well. Where was the other cousin? He was the one Jack really wanted. He was the one who'd most likely planned the ambush that tagged Jack first. Leo was about to leap out and grab the black cousin when Jack stopped him. "Leave him. Let's wait for the other one. He can't be too far behind." They knelt in the darkness a minute longer. Techno music blared from the overhead speakers. Jack's knees and feet ached, and he started to feel like he was being watched. He looked about the outside and saw nothing but colored walls and an occasional passerby. No one was looking at him. There was no way anyone could see him in this darkness. "Where is he?" Jack whispered to himself. "Here," came the reply from the darkness behind him.